After ripping every picture off the wall, shattering the glass all over the room, I lit the room on fire, and I laid down in the shards of glass in the fetal position, and I wept. And then I got on my knees, and I prayed to God, and I said, heal me or kill me, because I could not take one more second of that miserable suffocation in my soul. They say no child ever wants to grow up to be an addict, but I actually did. I actually thought that to myself. And I wanted to be hardcore, and I wanted to leave the mores and the constraints of society, and I wanted something beyond convention. I wanted nonconformity. And so I began experimenting with psychedelics because it was mind expansion, higher consciousness, creative enhancement, and I could paint, and I played my guitar, and I wrote more prolifically and eloquently than I ever had before. And I had always romanticized the beat poets and their use of heroin, and that's what I had in the back of my mind, that one day I'll be an addict. And I knew all of this when I was about 12 years old. I ended up living on the road, wandering around the country, following the Grateful Dead, and completely disconnected. Seems like I was free. I mean, I owed nobody, I owned nothing, but I was miserable, I was depressed, and I was very frightened. Never admit that, but I was. Eventually, I had to return to society, though. And when I did, I found myself working minimum wage jobs 2, maybe 3 months at a time, quitting. I saw everybody around me going to college, buying houses, starting families. And I began to detest them. But what's more, as I detested myself, the result of this, it started to become anxiety. And it was a desperately intense anxiety. And all day long, that's all you feel is nervous and anxious. And it became unbearable. But then I found a soothing medication that actually worked, and that medication was heroin. That decade was nothing but going in and out of jail, rehabs, psych wards, and it was in cycles, and I would use for a while, and then I would go to rehab, and then I'd come out and stay clean for a month or two, I'd relapse again, I'd break the law, go back to jail, over and over, recidivism for that entire time. I was living in a car. I lost my apartment. I was evicted from many, many apartments, and then finally I was living in a car. And I was running the streets of North Philly at night, looking for the next bag of dope and getting stuck up all the time and time and time again. And where I finally ended up was in the dungeon of my parents' basement. There were no windows, and it was dark, and I spent all my time by myself in that basement. I would leave for a little while, go to the methadone clinic, shoplift, cop more drugs, head back there to the basement, stay up for 5 days at a time, shooting coke, because I was on the methadone and the heroin high was blocked, so I had to do cocaine. And that's where I completely lost my mind. The doctors had told me that any shot, any injection, anyone could end my life, because what I was doing is I was shooting that blood from the infection. I was shooting up right in the infection, shooting that blood straight to my heart. And I didn't want to die. And every time I shot up, I prayed to Jesus. I said, Jesus, please don't let me die. I don't want to die. Despite that, all day, every day, all I continued to do was try to kill myself. And the doctors told me, if you continue with this, both of your forearms are going to be have to be amputated at the elbow, because they're going to become gangrenous. And in the midst of that, in all the loneliness and the despair, I felt a presence, and I felt the presence of Christ there with me. I know he was with me, and he was patient and calm and loving. And I was never alone in that basement. He reached down into that cesspool of filth, addiction, and he pulled me out because he heard my cries and I had suffered long enough. 2 days later, after that earnest prayer, in the burning room and in the shattered glass, I was arrested in a convenience store bathroom shooting up. And my PO gave me the choice, either rehab or jail. And that was no choice at all because I wanted so bad to get better. I found that I couldn't trust my thinking because my thinking was skewed and distorted. So I needed to let somebody else do my thinking for me for a while. And God put all those right people in my path. All the things that used to mar my self-esteem before, that I had no job skills and I had no girl and no home. And I mean, I have, now I have a beautiful wife and 2 priceless daughters. And I just bought my first house, was healed from hepatitis C. And I can't, as I'm saying this, I can't even believe that it's really me that's saying this about myself, because it's so amazing. And I finished college and I have a good career now. So it's been through abandoning my will and putting my life completely in his hands that these blessings have came. It was Jesus that was standing next to me all that whole time in that dark, cold, desperate basement. It was him who was there with me. And he promised never to leave me and never to forsake me. And he kept his word. He lifted me out of the ash heap and set me amongst princes.